Is it possible that blaming and complaining have some kind of benefit? Are blaming and complaining ever helpful? It seems like a really weird question to ask this, doesn't it? I mean, in my circles, in the faith communities and in serving churches and wanting to be a good Christian and helping people who are kind of tired of really trying to live right, we can think of lots of reasons why blaming and complaining have problems. I wrote an article for Crosswalk that is on, what's the question? Is how or number of reasons that blaming and complaining are not fruitful. And so I highlight some ways that they're not fruitful and maybe tackling reasons that aren't normally talked about. So I can link the article below once it's live. And if there's interest, I'm happy to do a video about that specific article as well. But when I was writing it, I felt really compelled to write something else that says, are blaming and complaining ever helpful? I wanted to ask that question. Are blaming and complaining ever helpful? Because there are other things that I address in some of the content, which is Christian phrases that keep us stuck, hidden, and hurting. All too often, we miss out on opportunities to really experience God and the way God moves in our lives and the lives of others because we use phrases or we think of verses in such a way that it becomes more about what we're doing, that our life becomes about achieving something, getting Christianity right. And so with this in mind, the whole concept of blaming and complaining is one of those areas where I have felt really hurt and others have been wounded as well. I hear stories all the time where they started to share honest, emotional responses to a situation that they had. Or in some way they were harmed in a particular situation. But when they named where the harm came from, or they named the pain that they were dealing with, they were immediately shut down, told things like, stop blaming, stop your complaining, or God doesn't want us to complain. He wants us to focus on being a victor. You need to pray more. All these different things that actually stop the process of honest emotional connection, expression, and connection. This is a place where we can, let me restate that because I get really excited. And so then my thoughts go blah, 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 all over the place. And then I don't even know where to start. So let me step back. Honest emotional expression that leads to relational connection. When we are not honest with what is going on inside of ourselves, including like what we're dealing with, we do not have a basis to connect with other people because we all have those things that are going on inside of us. But the connection that I'm talking about is that emotional, kind of more spiritual, spirit-led with God and relational connection that's at a deeper level where we really feel connected to a person. We feel connected to a person when we can relate to their humanness, to their challenges, to their struggles, how they've dealt with pain, and then how they experience something different on the other side. Too often, we want to jump to the victory, the bow, the pretty thing, the gratitude, the remembrance. These are good things, like being gracious, being thankful about things. Those are good things. They are helpful things. But when we use those as a way to jump the process that gets us there, we don't actually get there. We're kind of putting something, like we're putting a beautiful bow on a wound that is dripping ooze and goo. Who wants that package? I don't want it from other people, and I don't want it from myself. I want to actually be able to meet where we are. So going to the specific topic of blaming and complaining, it's important to highlight that there is a purpose. If we drill down to the core idea of what blaming is and complaining is, I think that could be helpful here. Now, I totally understand, I totally agree that as a pattern, as a way of life, there are many, many things that go sideways and become problematic for us when we're focused on blaming and complaining. That is what I put in the article. There are things like how we keep from personal responsibility. We're focused on others instead of what we actually need to focus on inside of ourselves. There are things that are happening there, okay? For this video, I want to talk about the good things, the helpful things in the core when you consider the words blaming and complaining, okay? To blame is to assign responsibility. Something or someone is at fault. It started a chain reaction of events. There's not always a fault. Sometimes we want to assign fault when there isn't fault, or we actually have a part to play. We don't want to accept that. But sometimes we're taking on fault that is not ours. And somebody else is all too happy to make sure that we take our responsibility that actually doesn't belong to us. That is not helpful. When we are clearly identifying who is responsible for what, that's helpful. This is like the whole concept of boundaries, is defining what is within our realm of self-stewardship and soul stewardship. Two concepts I talk about more in the group Cultivate Together, the growth community: self-stewardship and soul stewardship. It's developing who we are and how we live. So when we are not attending to that, when we're not taking appropriate assignment of responsibility, we can be in a position of codependence. And we can become like in a position where we're always one under everybody else. Or on the other hand, we're trying to put responsibility where it doesn't belong. And then we are one up, we are prideful, we're arrogant. We can deny the things that are going on inside of ourselves. But when there's an appropriate assignment of responsibility, when the blame is actually where it belongs, then we can decide what to do moving forward. Maybe it needs to be addressed specifically. Maybe there's an evil or a harm or injustice that needs to be brought to light. Maybe it's something that was unintentional, requires a private conversation. Maybe it's minor, it's just kind of like, oh, that probably shouldn't have happened, but it's not a big critical issue, so you can move past it. But when you have that information of where it actually belongs, you get clarity on how you can respond, how you choose to respond afterwards, rather than reacting because it's not like you're actually in an unhealthy place because responsibility is not where it belongs. One of the unhealthy ways of blaming that shows up in Christian communities, somebody is saying something really honest about a way that somebody treated them that was actually very damaging. They really harmed them. And they start to, if they say something to another person, especially if you're like in a church environment and the person who's doing the damaging thing is a leader, or you're talking to a married couple and the person who's doing the damage, typically, a lot of times it is, I don't want to say typically, but the high percentage in the research shows that it is men. There are women that do this as well, where they're kind of shirking their responsibility. They're putting it on the other person. And then the Christian leader comes in and gets it on them. Well, you're just blaming your spouse. You have responsibility too. And so there are some times when there's like abuse and destructive patterns that it is critical we are assigning blame to the right person and then learning to deal with it. Okay. And sometimes the blame does belong with us. Sometimes it is really important that we understand, actually, I am responsible for that. Now, it may trigger old feelings of shame. It may trigger messages that tell me I'm a bad person, but it may just be something that, yeah, guilt makes sense. I feel bad that I did that. I'm going to feel those feelings, sadness, how it affected other people, sadness for time that I lost, or grieving that, the different emotions that come up, so that we can make a different response in the future. That would be kind of a healthy way of processing through that when the blame is appropriately placed, when we notice, actually, that's mine to own. And that actually builds connection with other people too, because do you not feel safer with somebody who's willing to address what's theirs to own? Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Trust is lost when we are under authority or act as if we're under authority to somebody who's not going to tell us honestly if they ever mess up, when they always have to be the right person in the room. So blaming, the assignment of responsibility, that is when it is helpful. Complaining is helpful when it is an honest emotional expression, and particularly when an honest emotional expression is part of processing the emotion. It's part of processing the bad we experience. Like Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud talk about these positive and negative realities. This is like something that needs to be integrated that helps us live from a strong core of who we are. And these negative realities that are difficult to face, we're going to struggle. We're going to have some honest feelings about it. And then when we do express that, we can express it by ourselves, or we can get really honest with the emotion. It's guttural. It's literally like, sometimes I've needed to scream, cry out, yell, something, because there's like this visceral response that needs to come out. And then there's other times when I really need other people to hear that honest emotional expression of, this was really challenging. I am struggling with this because XYZ. Now, this is a complaint that is focused on my inner experience, how I'm processing it, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what I'm dealing with. Again, the appropriate responsibility is here, but it's my honest emotional expression of the reality that I'm facing. So when another person joins me, they can join in, wow, that sounds really hard. I may not even understand why it's hard for you. I may not agree that it should be difficult. I may feel all kinds of other things, but can I join you in noticing that is really challenging and hear the complaint in that sense? Then it's helpful. Then you get the gift of somebody else's presence. There's a concept that Dr. Townsend talks about. He coined this word, relational nutrients. So if you look up relationalnutrients.com, you'll find his list of relational nutrients, and he talks about it in his book, People Fuel. Relational nutrients provide energy for us. And the whole first quadrant, that he has 4 quadrants of relational nutrients, the whole first one is on presence. We build connection and build foundation for other engagements in a relationship when there is presence. If we deny someone else's complaint all the time, like there's no room for it, or we shut them down when they start to assign responsibility where it actually belongs, even if we shut them down when that responsibility belongs to them, which would look like, oh, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal, or, oh, I'm sure you meant, trying to discount that they're actually taking ownership. Allow the ownership to be where it is. Allow some room for that honest emotional expression so that the blaming and complaining are helpful. Now, I can talk about in another video all the ways that the blaming and complaining is definitely not helpful, which we think about plenty, and which is talked about plenty. But I think some of the concepts that I talked about in the article will also be helpful in delineating the difference between the two. What is helpful in honest emotional expression and appropriate assignment of responsibility versus the ways that we actually use blaming and complaining to deny our responsibility, to deny emotions, to deny the reality of what we're experiencing, so that either denying it or owning it. And I want to make another point. In the article that I wrote tying to this concept, are blaming, complaining ever helpful? I highlighted a verse in Matthew that we're probably all familiar with. And I highlighted this verse because I know this is one that has come to mind for me. It is one I've heard from other people plenty of times, and I've heard others say that they have experienced this as well. When they start to assign responsibility where it belongs, instead of receiving validation or understanding, or somebody who wants to come alongside them to bring about justice, etc., what they'll hear is, in addition to, you should just stop blaming and complaining, they'll hear things like, stop judging. You're just being judgmental. So now what they're doing is they're actually judging you for having an honest emotional expression, and telling you, and when they get uncomfortable, this is a lot of times when this happens, stop judging. You're just judging. God tells us not to judge. We can't judge other people. We just need to focus on ourselves. So there's like a truth mixed in there, that personal ownership piece that I talked about, right? But that's not really what's happening when people are making that statement. They're actually not being honest. with the fact that they're having a hard time listening to you, or they're tired of listening, or whatever's going on for them. So they try to deflect and deny your honest expression, or find a different way to approach the challenge. Maybe you're not being not giving really honest expression, and they're getting really frustrated. There's a different way to approach that, right? So what the verse is used is Matthew 7:3-5. This is the CSB version. Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but don't notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the splinter out of your eye, and look, there is a beam of wood in your own eye? Hypocrite! First take the beam of wood out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. Really, this verse does highlight personal responsibility, which is super important. That is the crux of these concepts, soul stewardship and self stewardship, that I talk about, developing who we are and how we live. But what happens when people use that verse a lot of times is that they will spin it around and make it about when you assign appropriate responsibility, or when you complain and share an honest emotional expression, that now you're just judging and you shouldn't look at the other person because you have plenty going on yourself. It's actually a way of denying honesty, denying connection to you, denying the reality that feels bad. So, yes, personal ownership are very critical, as I said. And when it's helpful is when there is appropriate ownership, but you can be appropriately honest about your emotions and responsible for what you're responsible for, and have a Christian use this verse as a way to cut you off and not experience what God wants you to experience, which is presence, comfort, connection, and care. So I know I've said a lot. I know that sometimes my concepts can maybe feel a little vague and big. So hopefully this makes sense and is helpful in some way. And like I said, if you're interested, I can do an article or a video to go with the article about ways that this is unfruitful, because that is important to understand as well. But to kind of go through these delineations. If you are still here and you have found this video helpful, please, please, please do comment below, or just give me a thumbs up, give me a like, give me something that kind of lets me know, yes, this was helpful. When you do that, when you subscribe, when you like, when you comment, when you hit the bell for notifications, all those different things, it's also a signal to say, hey, you know what? I found this content helpful. I'd like to help others be able to see it so they can be helped by it as well. That's great. That would be great. But if you have questions, feel free to drop them below. And hopefully I made myself clear on ways that this can be helpful, and really identifying that distinction of personal ownership, honest emotional expression, at the core of just blaming, which is assignment of responsibility, and complaining, which is expression of what our experience is, the thoughts and feelings. If you would like help in connecting to what that honest place is for yourself, or processing things that you do feel like you have a complaint and you can't talk to other people, and maybe it's been difficult to find a therapist, or whatever's going on, my tool, Unleash Heart and Soul Care Sheets, can be helpful for that too. It is just a way to process life's challenges with God. So that's something to consider. Let me know your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And again, I just really hope that this is helpful, because I think too many of us are living under burdens that God did not put upon us. And He is calling us to live in more freedom and experience more of Him in this life that He gave us. Take care.